So thank you all for joining us today for our session on big events. We are hoping in the next 25 minutes we'll give you some tips, tricks, and strategies to turn your next peak week into a profitable week. So before we get started, we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Dana Rausch. I'm a Strategic Services Team Lead in the US office.
And I'm Jon Collins. I'm a Strategic Services Team Lead here in our London office.
All right, so I'm sure we're all very familiar with big events. That's probably why you're sitting in this room right now. It's the staple for many industries. It's an opportunity for us to generate a significant proportion of our annual revenue within a very short period of time. Now, to actually make the most of this opportunity, it requires a really strong strategy that's deeply rooted within knowing our customers, right? So that we're able to create a strategy that speaks with our customers in a meaningful way to help us overcome the challenges that come with big events. So speaking of challenges, we have three listed out here, three big ones. So I'm sure we're all quite familiar with these. First, these big events drive massive customer acquisition as well as customer reactivation. However, a lot of these customers are rarely loyal and they very rarely generate profit. Next, because of this, our acquisition costs are also very high, right? During these times, we're really competing with everyone for the customer's attention. So oftentimes, we're spending a lot of money to get customers through our doors. But then, without proper engagement, a lot of those customers ultimately disappear after the big event. So we're going to tackle our strategy within 3 steps. First, we're going to talk about acquiring and reactivating our customers. Next, we'll engage them throughout our event. And then lastly, we want to retain them after our event. We're going to wrap up with a case study from a client that has done this very successfully, and then we'll give you a quick summary. And now we'll go to Jon for acquisition.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. So before the event begins, we have the acquisition phase, which I personally think is possibly the most important part of the entire event because it's going to give us the theoretical ceiling for our number of customers and indirectly our revenue as well. Let's talk about a few of the main considerations. So, first of all, segmentation. How does this differ from business as usual? The phenomenon of users who only become active when a big event is live, and then when should we actually be communicating about a big event, and what should our expectations be? Let's talk about segmentation first. So ordinarily, about 80% of our activity is going to be driven by our active users. If you're all familiar with the life cycle stages that Optimove uses, I presume you are. 80%. This changes dramatically, as you can see on the screen at the moment, during a big event. We're going to see massive increases in the numbers of new users, some of whom will be interacting with a brand for the first time. And then reactivated users or returning users, some of whom will only ever interact with a brand when a big event is live. Now, the overall success of an event is going to depend on activating these users. However, the average value of a lot of these users is going to be significantly lower than our normal active users. So what we're trying to do is engage them at quantity instead of just purely quality. Leaning into this phenomenon is the key to maximizing our overall revenue. So when we get into big event segmentation, what we really need to be doing is treating these users with an additional layer of personalization, making sure we are treating new and returning users as actually new and returning users for a big event. So tweaking what we're doing normally as part of our BAU to represent where these users are. Next, let's talk about those users who are only active during a big event. These users are the driving force behind the phenomenon we saw in that last event, right? Massive amounts of new users, massive amounts of returning users. They do come with a number of challenges, though. So first of all, and potentially most significantly to our bottom line, they are very generosity hungry and generosity sensitive. So in the first case, they consume generosity, bonusing discounts, at 3 times the rate of our active users. Triple. So just think about how much that's going to cost you, your acquisition costs, as Dana mentioned, over the course of that big event. Secondly, because of their sensitivity to that generosity, they're also more likely just to jump ship if somebody else offers them a more generous offer, something that's frankly sometimes a little bit absurd, especially in like the sportsbook spaces where we start to see those open account offers get a little bit sky high. These are the guys who will be taking advantage of that. Interacting with them is key, however, as we spoke about before. The overall revenue base is inflated by them during these big events. The other main issue that we have with them is that we don't have that much transactional information on them, especially if they're new to the brand for the first time, right? We may have nothing. Where we do have something, it starts to become a case of operating a little bit differently, right? So when we consider activity of our users, quite often we're looking at, say, 90 days, maybe a year. When it comes to this type of user, we really need to be examining them for the lifetime of their account, 2 years, 3 years, however far back we've got, in order to try and glean some insights of what they like and what kind of things they are interested in. So we need to make sure we're segmenting them specifically if we can, using our transaction histories to pick out those users who only interact with big events, and then further segment them by value. This is going to be really important to make sure that we don't go over the top in offering too much generosity to these users in the first place. Obviously, not all of these users may be worth retaining in the long run, but they are worth building a relationship with during this acquisition phase, because some of them will potentially end up being high-value users for you in the long run. One other thing I'd really implore everybody to do and think about is make sure we're looking at historical big events, making sure we have a good and as clear a picture as possible of what these users are actually like. So we have a lot of historical data. It may not be the exact same user, but we know the profile. Let's make sure that we understand what day of the week they tend to be active, the channels that they use, frequency caps, all good things that we can use to market towards them specifically and in a personalized fashion that may be slightly different to what we have for our active users. Once we have all these sorted, let's talk about when we should be talking about them. So a key factor in communications around big events is that we do it with plenty of time. So the best practice will probably dictate around 3 to 4 weeks in advance of the event, we start our marketing plan. Slight proviso, we don't want to be doing that if it's going to clash with important BAU communications. So for example, if I'm marketing for the FIFA World Cup, I don't really want to be sending out messages that are clashing with the Premier League communications that I'm sending out that weekend. Let's make sure we're only talking to people who have nothing else really going on. Why we're doing it that far in advance is really to just generate as much engagement as possible. So, interesting stat here for you. Users who engage pre-event are 1.7 times more likely to engage during the event. What do I mean by engagement? So obviously, it's great if we can sell during the acquisition phase, right? Nobody's going to turn that down. But there are other forms of engagement which may be almost as valuable come the big event. So I'm talking about things like opening an account, reactivations, turning on notifications, signing up to newsletters, other strong indicators of interest, which we can leverage for activity when the actual event starts. Something else that we can do and take advantage of at this point is making sure not only that we're generating a sense of engagement and excitement, but we can also start to flood our systems with data. Data points is going to be really important, especially when you consider those users who are only active during a big event. We can start to train our recommendation models so we have an idea of what's the most popular, what's being reviewed most, what is being wishlisted. So in lieu of a user's transaction history, we're starting to get population metrics about might work for most of the users that we have. Once we have those users in place, Dana will tell you how to engage them.
Amazing, yes. So once we've acquired, reactivated a lot of our customer base, now we need to engage with them through the event. So what we're going to want to do throughout our big events so that we're engaging in a meaningful way, we want to make sure that we're personalizing all of our communications, right? If we're not personalizing, if we're not sending relevant messaging, then we're ultimately not going to be building loyalty, right? We want to make sure that the customer feels understood by us, and ultimately, that's what leads them to being a loyal, long-lasting customer. Now, the customer experience, of course, is important, but we also need to factor in maximization of value, right? This is a time period in which a lot of our customers are not going to be very profitable, so it's important that we keep an eye on our bottom line and make sure we're focusing our efforts where it counts. Cool. So how do we do that? We're going to start with personalization and more specifically with segmentation. So, as I'm sure you all know, Optimove is a big fan of segmentation. We really believe that segmentation is the foundation for a strong CRM program. Now, if we are not properly segmenting and instead relying on batch and blast campaigns, for example, we can put as much content personalization as we want within a campaign, but it's still going to struggle to resonate with the customer because that underlying message may not be relevant, right? Instead, if we're properly segmenting while we're considering key moments in the customer journey, we're considering important customer behaviors, then that's a strong segmentation framework that then we feel certain that everything within this house will kind of fall in line, right? We feel certain that our messaging will be relevant, right? Because we're, again, considering the customer journey. We're thinking about customer behaviors. We can also know that our personalized content is going to be even more effective on top of that relevant messaging. And then from there, promotion, budget management, channel customization, and optimization, all of that becomes much, much easier on top of a relevant message, right? So this is why we think of segmentation as a strong foundation, because all of these things can exist without segmentation. However, when it's built on top of that strong segmentation framework, all of these are going to work together in a way that will actually lead you to a successful peak week. Cool. So now that we have our segmentation sorted, now we can start thinking about content personalization. Content personalization can come in many forms. It can be something simple, like using personalization tags to call out a customer's name or loyalty status, etc., within the body of an email. It can also look like personalized subject lines to get the customer's interest from the start. Can even go down into product recommendations. We even have some clients who customize particular offers for each individual customer. So it really can go as deep as you want it to. And we know that customers who are consistently utilizing content personalization have great success. We see a great impact on click rate, response rate, and revenue per targeted customer. Of course, that revenue per targeted customer is very important during a time like peak week when we're trying to maximize value. Next part of our customer experience that we want to consider is where we're engaging with them. Of course, we know that not every customer is going to be opted into every channel, so this is where multi-channel really comes in. We want to make sure that we're fully utilizing our execution channel suite, right? We want to make our campaigns even more successful with the extended reach that comes with using multiple channels. But that's not the only piece of success that you'll find. We'll also see a great impact to revenue and response rate, so customer engagement, when we're meeting the customer where they're at, right? We have to remember that a different customer is going to engage with different channels in a different way, right? So this is yet another opportunity for us to make a message more relevant for the customer, right? Because if we know what channel they like, we can make sure we're sending them a relevant message, personalized on the channel that they respond to the most. And ultimately, this is going to build a sense of loyalty that is going to, ideally, lead us through the event and create loyalty after the event as well. Cool. So now that we have the customer experience sorted, we want to start thinking about maximizing value. A great way to do this is by utilizing predictive modeling. There are a lot of ways we can do this. Typically, when we're maximizing value, it's a very manual process, right? So using predictive modeling is a great way to automate that. We have a great example here. We can use predictive modeling to help us with our promotion management. So a predictive model can choose, in this example, the promotion type that's most relevant to a customer, as well as the promotion amount. So first, within this, we're thinking about the promotion type. This could be for gaming, a bet and get versus a deposit match. For retail, could be something more like 10% off of new arrivals versus 10% on top of an already discounted item, right? So different offers for different customers. Once we have this sorted, now we can start thinking about the promotional tier that we would like to assign per customer. We have a gaming example here, so I'm going to walk us through it quickly because I know not everyone in the room is gaming. So on our horizontal axis here, we have essentially our discount ratio, and I'm sure it's quite small for some of you, so I'll walk us through. Over here, we have 0 to 5% discount ratio, all the way to over 30% discount ratio. Hopefully there aren't too many folks falling over here. Now, on our y-axis, we have our dollar amount. So orange line, revenue, 1 month post receiving a promotion. Black line is average deposit amount 1 month post promotion. For those of us not in gaming, an average deposit, we could also think of it as like an average purchase amount. So for this specific customer, right, every customer within predictive modeling will have this graph, and each graph will look different for each customer. For this customer specifically, we see that deposits and revenue are at its highest at 5 to 10% discount ratio. Now that means that when we're assigning promotional tiers to this customer, we want to make sure that we're not going further than a 10% discount ratio for their 1 month lifetime value, let's say. Because if they go past 10%, that means we're unnecessarily spending our promotional budget, right? And that's what we want to avoid during this time. We want to make sure that we're giving promotions to customers because we know that they're important. We know that promotions give customers a feeling of value, right? Like they're getting something from you. So we want to make sure that we're still providing promotions, but we're doing that in a way that protects our bottom line. Cool. So that wraps up our engage section. The theme is, of course, relevancy. I hope if you take one thing away, that's what it will be. Relevancy so that we can send the personalized message at the right time, a relevant message again, and hopefully build loyalty that lasts us through the event and after.
Yeah, strap in, guys. You've got me for another 9 slides. So let's talk about retention. Retention is probably the hot topic that we get on big events, right? These other things, great. Most people are really concerned about how do I keep the users that I've spent so much time and money acquiring after the event. Let's talk about a couple of considerations that go into that one. So the first one is who, right? Who should we be retaining? Is it everybody? Or are there a tier of users who maybe we can cut loose? And the second is the how, right? That's probably why you're all here, find out how you do it. But first, let's talk about the who. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this section, it's that not all users are worth retaining. After an event, we typically see churn rates spike across the board. However, this is not done equally. Churn rates are highest, and I'm going to use my laser because I might not get invited back, and how often you get to use a laser. So yeah, they're in this low tier here, right? The lowest 60% of users by revenue value have churn rates of over 60%. And their overall contribution to your revenue base is quite small, right? So do we really need to be going after these people aggressively to retain them? Or should we just say, thank you for your business, I'll see you in a year's time next time that we have a big event on? Obviously, your mileage is going to vary, but we do see this kind of Pareto principle quite often in our data and in our benchmarking. So what we should be doing instead is putting our effort into the mid-tier and the top-tier group of users who actually contribute pretty much all of the revenue from that big event anyway, but then at the other side of things, probably fit our ICP in a much more reasonable way, right? We don't have to go out of our way to engage them. They're actually quite interested in the product. They're quite interested in the communications that we're sending them. So focus your efforts on those, identifying them and then retaining those mid and high tier users. Secondly, the how. So this is not an exhaustive list of how to retain people, but these are 3 examples, I think, of ways that we've observed our clients go after things in ways that have been successful in various different ways. The first, and probably the most blindingly obvious one, is just to incentivize more activity, right? So we've seen that in the previous session, if anyone was here, discounts are always on tool. They can work for certain users. They're not always the best tool, but this is something that we can definitely leverage. What I would urge people to do is to think hard about whether using these and not just give general discounts or offers that can just kind of be open to abuse, really. It's not just free money. make it relevant to the purchases or the activity that those users have already made. So I'll give you an example. If I've just sold someone a coffee machine, maybe I want to be putting my money into consumables that go along with that coffee machine instead of just like another $100 discount on more electronics, right? Let's keep something that may enhance our relationship with them. And indeed, if we are able to bring them back as like a preferred vendor for the future, then suddenly we don't have a big event person anymore. We have an active user, and we know that they are much more valuable to our brand. Second, and I think my most my personal favorite one of these is to use interactive content. So quite often, brands rely too heavily on the discount and transactional messaging post-big event, right? They don't spend enough time on informational and educational content. And I think it's such a shame when people don't do this. Like I say, I think this is my favorite one here. I think it probably works best with those mid and high tier users. I'll give you a couple of examples here. So one, I have an investment account. This brand never ever sends you free money, right? That's not what they're about. What they do is send you important information about why they're doing things. It's not a black box. Every time they make trades on your behalf, they're sending you a bunch of reasons like, here are the macroeconomic trends, here are the stocks that we think are rising in value, a whole bunch of stuff that's way more engaging than just giving me like an extra £5 of managed free content, it just goes a lot further and helps build trust in a much better way. Second example, back in COVID, you all remember COVID, right? That was 5 years ago. Who's feeling old? Show of hands, was anybody not in the workforce 5 years ago? Oh, okay, well, one guy, he's getting ID'd at the drinks later. Yeah, so my wife got sick of me telling her about baking and suggested that I play poker with my friends. So, we found this poker app. This poker app is genius, and I think is the best version of this I've ever seen. Every time you open this app, they send you an in-app message, right? It's like a little push notification. It's not that invasive. And it just gives you this amazing strategy. Like, in your last game, you had this hand in this position. Here is some strategy that you can use the next time you're in this position. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Again, doesn't cost anything. You probably have all this educational, informational content at your fingertips, or maybe even on a website. And you can leverage this through your CRM programs for practically nothing, right? So make greater use of this as you're going. The last one is earned content, by which I mean social testimonial content. It's very easy to let the negativity take over the airwaves after a big event when you get the few users who had a bad experience just blasting Google. We don't have to kind of let that be the case, right? You can let users, whether it's social or, as I say, created content about your product, take over your accounts. You can amplify their voices with yours and really control the narrative of how much of a positive impact the big event could be from your brand. And this is going to be really important when you circle back the next time you have a big event, because what do those casual users look for? They look for generosity, but they're also going to look for reputation, right? They're going to look for a brand that they know they can trust. If you're not a household name, this is a really good way to get in with that. So these are just 3 ways I recommend that you go about things. Definitely lean on more of those interactive educational and informational guides if you can. Okay, we want to leave you with a case study about the UEFA Football Championships. So we had a client. They came to us primarily as a casino, but had seen some success growing as a sportsbook as well. They came to Optimove Strategic Services, basically looking for some help to develop a marketing plan specific for that tournament. And what we had at the time, and why I'm showing you this, is it's basically almost like a perfect A/B test, right? We go from nothing to perfectly tailored marketing plan. And what you can see is this. These are the results from the 4 weeks of that tournament, right? Increase in every metric that they care about, player numbers, deposits amounts, activity days, and ultimately revenue as well. So great job by them, but I hope this is going to illustrate the art of the possible for you just by taking a little bit of time to think more carefully about what we've been talking about here today. So I'll leave you with these key takeaways. So we can make the most of our big events. We can do it by making sure segmentation is correct at every stage of that big event, making sure we're treating users with personalization as much as we can at all times. Personalization really needs to be there, not just to maximize revenue, but also to try and build loyalty and engagement that can last beyond the event. And lastly, as I already pointed out, it's okay to not retain everybody. Let's make sure our resources and our efforts are being put in the place where they're going to do the brand the most good in the weeks and months following that big event. And let's just have another great year the year after, right? So that's everything we have for you. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you. Thank you. Please rate my YouTube video. And join us over at the Optimove Zone, where we and a lot of our fantastic colleagues will be happy to talk through how you do some of this on the platform and to answer any of your questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Have a great day.